Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the third generation of the Toyota Tacoma, but more specifically, it's a TRD off-road. It even has the 6-foot long bed, and it's in the color that Toyota likes to call magnetic gray metallic, which looks really nice in person and has a lot of flake. And if you're new to my channel, I actually used to own a third generation magnetic gray Tacoma for 60,000 miles. So I have a lot of bum time in the seat of these, and I have a lot that I want to share with you guys, so you can expect to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of this third generation Tacoma to help you understand why it's so desirable, why it's probably going to age really well, and decide if you should buy a used one, because the fourth generation Tacoma has already been out for a few months, so you can expect to see a walk around. All the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60, and then my final thoughts of the third generation Tacoma. And huge thanks to the Twin Falls Subaru for letting me borrow theirs for the day. This one specifically has about 15,000 miles. They're asking about $38,000, and they ship all over the country, so I'll link them below if you're interested. Otherwise, let's dive right into this review. And if you like Toyota, the third generation Tacoma, or my video, please consider liking my video. That smock of kindness really goes a long way. It helps me know you want to see more stuff like this, but also helps you by having the tube choose to show you more stuff like this. Thank you, guys. But if you're new to the Toyota Tacoma, you really need to know that that nameplate first came out back in 1995, and the first generation from 95 to 04 was actually a compact truck, kind of like the old S10s, kind of like the third gen and earlier Ford Rangers. It really wasn't a very big truck. It wasn't actually until the second generation that these ballooned to a mid-sized truck, where it's basically the same size in this third generation as it was in the second generation. But they're really popular. Typically, these sell over 200,000 units every single year in North America alone, but they're also sold in Mexico. They're also sold in Canada, and this is the Hilux in other parts of the country, which is basically a cooler version of it, kind of. There's a diesel version. There's a lot else that we could get into, but this is not about the Hilux. This is about the Tacoma. So these are a really popular vehicle. They sometimes outsell the other mid-sized trucks 3, 4, 5 to 1, depending on the year, depending on how well the sales do, depending on where it is in the make and the model. So for this being the third generation, it was offered from 2016 to 2023. So not as long of a run as some of the other generations of the Tacoma prior to this one, but does it work? Is it reliable? Is it dependable? Does it feel like a truck? The answer is yes to all those questions. It has a 3.5-liter V6. It's the last generation to even have a V6, and overall, it offers you quite a lot if this is what you're in the market for. And something I hear on the forums that has kind of been a deterrent for a few people going to the fourth generation is that Toyota moved fourth generation Tacoma production to Mexico. Basically, the assumption is they outsourced the labor costs to save some money, and a lot of people aren't happy that this isn't homegrown and assembled in the United States anymore, or at least the Texas plant where it used to be assembled. Or how about the Foreigner that's assembled in Japan? A lot of people wish that their Japanese truck was built in either Japanese or America, but you know what's interesting? This third generation was actually not only built in Texas. The VIN number on this one starts with a 3, so this 2021 TRD off-road example, which actually feels really solid and has really hard door slams, you know, it sounds like it's well put together. This one was actually assembled in Mexico as well, so that must not be a problem with how good the quality of this, how good the original R&D engineering of the Tacoma actually is. And there's already third generation examples of the Tacoma that have several 100,000 miles on the original powertrain. Sure, the V6 and the 6-speed automatic, they have their problems. Sometimes you need to put it in Etc mode for it to just fit and work a little bit better, not have to rev out as high to get to the torque band of this one. But overall, it feels like a truck. And after driving a couple hundred vehicles before getting back in the seat of a third generation Tacoma, it feels like what I used to love. It feels what I wanted. It feels dependable and reliable, which is why you buy a Tacoma. It's not going to be the softest riding, most nimble thing on the road, but you buy this for the purpose of maintaining resale value, for not losing a ton of money every single year. For some reason, because of the reliability component, Tacomas have been one of the highest retaining resale values of any vehicle ever. So I think the last years of this third generation are probably going to be no different. If this one currently is worth $38,000, roughly give or take, with 15,000 miles, I can only imagine in a couple more years, a couple more tens of thousands of miles, you probably aren't going to lose a whole lot. If you do decide to resell this later and you decide that a third generation might not be the right vehicle for you, At least you're not going to take as big of a hit as some of the other vehicles, especially luxurious vehicles or high-end mid-sized trucks from some of the other competition that just don't have the same track record as the Tacoma. So while my own personal experiences with Tacomas, where I used to own a 2013 that I ordered brand new, it was a regular cab 5-speed 4-cylinder, and I only kept it for about 2 years, 13 or 14,000 miles, but it was a good vehicle. And then a few years later, I came back to the Tacoma. I bought a 2017, also with the 5-speed 4-cylinder engine. That was an Axis cab. It was an SR with convenience package, so it was definitely the peasant version of this. It was not the TRD off-road, full-size version, but it was still really nice. I drove it for probably 62 or 63,000 miles before I sold it and switched to Subarus, which just fit the bill a little bit better for what I was needing. But after getting this one to borrow for the day, after getting this one and driving it around a little bit, which you'll see the driving impressions in the 0 to 60 in a couple minutes, you know, it feels a lot different than I remember it. After driving a lot of vehicles, a lot of better handling, better visibility, just more convenient creature comfort vehicles, it took a little bit of time to get back and used to this one. But the more it's parked under this shaded tree, the more I'm looking at it, the more I actually reminisce and miss the old one, because this is exactly what it's supposed to be. Reliable transportation. It's not supposed to be the most convenient, the most creature comfort focused. It's just supposed to be a gosh darn reliable Toyota truck, and I think it does a good job at that. And for those of you guys wondering at home, it does fit in a full-size parking spot, but it's tight. There's not a lot of extra room. This truck with the 6-foot bed is roughly 19 feet long, so it's not much shorter than the average full-size truck. The wheelbase is about 10.5 feet, so it is pretty planted and stable on the road. Without counting the mirrors, it is about 6.25 feet wide, roughly 5.8 feet tall. It's about a 4,400 pound truck the way that this one is configured, but what was actually pretty pathetic is the payload capacity on this TRD off-road suspension is only 940 pounds, so you can only hold 940 pounds worth of people or stuff in this Tacoma. So if all 5 occupants weigh over 200 pounds, you are over the limit and your 6-foot bed is useless. You can't legally put anything in there. But otherwise, it has about 9.4 inches of ground clearance under the rear axle. It has a 373 final drive ratio, which means it puts the power down pretty well. MPG is sacrificed a little bit, but it's a well-balanced final drive anyways. It can do a full circle in about 44 feet, and then the approach angle is 32 degrees. The rear departure angle is 23 degrees. Then the last few things to mention here is the gas door is located on the driver's side of the bed. It's non-locking though, so the bums might attempt to siphon some of your 21.1 gallons of 87 octane fuel. This one specifically with the V6 is rated for 18 city, 22 highway, or 20 combined, making your overall highway road trip about 460 miles, and then has a Goodyear Wrangler tire. It's a 265 70/16. This one, with about 15,000 miles, only has 6/32 seconds of tread depth. So I'm not sure what this one started as, but that's not a ton of tread depth for only 15 miles on it. And then this is the remote. It's pretty basic. It just has lock, unlock, and panic button. But if you push this and hold it on the 3rd time, watch what happens. Takes a little while. Get some flashing at the side mirror turn signals, and it eventually starts up. But something that's really sad, something that Toyota should have fixed a long time ago with the software, is when you open the door, it shuts back off. What's up with that? The driver's side door panel is really not very special. It's all black. There's only a couple contrasting materials in here though. It's gonna age really well. It's already held up really well. There is a couple bottles and not really much of a snack pocket down there. Unnamed speaker. You do have Tacoma etched in on the plastic door sill. You do have a basic running board on this one. All-weather mats, rubberized pedals and dead pedal, hood release. You have the reset for tire pressure monitoring system. You do have traction control, a few of your other options for how this one is spec'd. And then you do have a power seat, but this one is not heated. It's cloth. After 15,000 miles, I wouldn't say that it's aged extremely well, but it is fairly comfortable. And then sitting inside here, it does feel very utilitarian. It does feel very much like a truck. I appreciate the overall comfort of this, the 6 o'clock handle, the horn. It's not super loud, not super deep, but it just feels like a basic Toyota truck horn. The side mirror is actually really big, and you do get pretty good visibility out this, way better than something like the new Colorado. And then the windshield, it's not huge. You do miss a lot of visibility there compared to things that aren't a truck, but overall, it's pretty good. When you fire right up with the push button start, do the needles dance? Nope, they don't, but it does come to life. The V6 does actually sound pretty good, a little Tacoma graphic in there. And then you have voice and volume controls on the left of the wheel, adaptive cruise on the stock, and some of your infotainment settings right there. So let's just quickly go through a few of those. It's not the fastest to respond. Sometimes you can see the TPMS, that's coming on kind of slow. It does have pitch and roll. I wouldn't assume that this is very accurate though. And then basic other information right there. Again, kind of slow for everything to respond. But it's a truck, it's a Tacoma, it's not a Tesla, so that's what you get. The basic infotainment screen on this one, it does an okay job. You do have physical HVAC controls. You have the scrolly dial for the two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive system. Make sure you go into neutral before you go into 4-low. And when you go into 4-low, that's when you can activate your diff lock. That's when you can use multi-terrain select. You can do crawl control on your different speeds. You can call the police. You can get some help if you need it. And then you have your basic incandescent lighting. Otherwise, you have a QI wireless charger. Hopefully it works pretty well. What you guys have been saying on the forums for that, I don't hear much, so hopefully that means it actually works pretty well. So check that out. Comment below your thoughts on it. You have some cup holders. You have the cool shifter, which you kind of have to go through a gated sequence, and I like that the colors are different on each one. But that's your backup camera. Trajectory lines don't move. Clarity is awful. But does it show you what you need to see? Well, it shows you better than your other backup camera over there. So I'd say it does a pretty decent job. And then you have a couple more cup holders right here and manual e-brake. And then you have a pretty good size center console that does have some USBs in there as well, but no 12 volts. Otherwise, you have a compass, auto dimming mirror, but I don't see any garage door controls, Bluetooth speaker, airbag. And with that said, let's turn it off and hop in the back. The back of the Tacoma is actually a pretty interesting place to be. First of all, the door panel basically follows the same engineering design as the front, so it's what you expect. And then this is the back seat. It's a 40-60 split bench, so you do have this little strap on each side to pull it down, and you can see you have a little bit of storage there, but it's kind of hard to get the seat to go all the way down. It just doesn't feel like it flows very well unless you pull up the bottom seat. With this, you do have a little bit more storage down here. This one just has the cleats for the bed rails if you want those. And then when this is up, you're probably gonna have to take off the headrest, but then you could lay it down, presumably completely flat, and you have a little bit of a plastic storage back there. But if you have a full-size adult sitting back here, I'm 5'11", and how comfortable is it? My knees are basically into the driver position from where I was driving the vehicle. I do have some cup holders. Seriously, a mid-sized truck at this price point needs to have ventilation back here. What is going on, Toyota and all you other manufacturers? And then you also don't have an armrest back here. But at 5'11", I have maybe this much room and above my head, so just enough that I'm not brushing my hair against it. I could drive across town. I could drive to another town in this or ride in it, but I don't think I'd want to take a road trip as a full-size adult back here. I might be wrong, but I don't feel the AC as strong as I want it to. For you guys being able to see that it's on full blast up front, it doesn't really make its way back here very well. And then this is the bed. It's 6 feet long. It lowers down softly. It's pretty easy to lift up. You do have a tiny storage pocket over here, but seriously, Toyota, what the heck is going on? Why is it not standard across the board to have all of the storage compartments? Both of my Tacomas had that. My 6-foot bed had that over here. Is there something I'm missing? If there is, comment below. Otherwise, are they just cheaping out? What's going on? Just like on the new 4th generation, the cleats are now a $30 option. Mine came factory with that, and I don't remember that being an add-on on the window sticker. But overall, it's a nice composite bed. It's going to do a pretty good job. And if you remember, the payload on this is only 940 pounds minus a 200-pound driver or whatever you weigh. Means the max payload you're ever going to have on this legally is like 740, maybe more, maybe less, but not much more than that. So I think the composite bed liner does a good job for that. You might want like a rubberized mat or something if you don't want stuff sliding around, or maybe you could get some poles put in to hold boxes and stuff like that from sliding around. But overall, it does the job for a mid-sized truck. And if you get a red shotgun, you'll notice the door panel, again, basically is exactly the same as what you've already seen. Bottle holders, not huge, unnamed speakers, Tacoma etched in. Manual controls for the backpack. The backpack's at least happy, and again, these bolstered cloth seats, they're actually pretty comfortable and about what I remember. But no extra storage on the transmission tunnel or above the locking glove box. There's a key hidden in your remote that you can use. And then, you know, it's not huge, but it's enough to store some extra stuff beyond your pamphlets that you get from the dealership. And it looks like that's probably the cubby door to your cabin air filter. Anyways, let's come around to the front. I'll pop the hood and I'll show you what this Atkinson cycle 3.5 liter V6 looks like under the hood. Under the hood is the dual overhead cam 3.5-liter V6 engine that some version of this has been used in a lot of Toyota and Lexus products. It makes about 278 horsepower, but you have to rev it out to about 6,000 RPM. So about the same horsepower as the new Turbo 4, but much higher in the RPM band. And then it makes 265 torque, and even that you have to rev out really high to 4,600 RPM. Overall, this engine looks very cramped under the hood. You also have a ton of space in front of the radiator. These trucks grew, they're pretty long, but there's a lot of dead space, hopefully some decent crumple zone for safety measures before you actually get to the engine and the fan. But you can see the serpentine belt down there, the alternator, your coolant hose, your air filter in the box through all the baffling, and then the engine cover. Your exhaust manifold's back here. There's a lot of heat coming off this engine. It's already almost 100 degrees out, and there's so much more heat coming from this. But you have a few reservoirs that are easy to get to. The oil filter is unfortunately underneath the engine, so you're gonna have to crawl under there and hope it doesn't drip on you, or use a cup method to squeeze around it when you take that off. The oil fill, the battery, the fuse box. Overall, it does an okay job. I am excited to drive a 4th gen, and I think the more powerful 4-cylinder turbo power plant, just based off of convenience, being able to easily identify everything and have way more room on each side of it where it's an inline engine versus the big V6. I think a lot of people, or I actually understand why a lot of people are actually starting to really favor that engine over this V6. But this is a great engine. It's reliable. It's, again, all the things that we mentioned. So with that said, let's drop the hood and take it for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the 3rd generation V6 Tacoma TRD off-road 6-foot bed. The V6 sounds good. I think a lot of people are going to miss that, although the new 4th generation turbo does have just a tiny bit of growl to it for a 4-cylinder. This V6 obviously is going to sound better. Visibility, it's okay. The cabin isn't huge, so the rear view mirror does do an okay job of going through. I do wish it had the sliding rear glass, but the rest of these windows, they're probably about average compared to the other mid-sized trucks I've driven. But when I did first hop inside of this one, I felt like there's not great visibility from the windshield. The windshield really isn't that tall, and with how high the dashboard on this is, it feels like there's maybe a literal foot of vertical height to this one. For having driven one of these more than any other vehicle that I've ever owned, over 60,000 miles in my own 3rd gen, and now having driven a few hundred vehicles since selling that, it's kind of weird to be back inside of one of these. I did drive a 3rd gen TRD Pro a while ago, but that was near the beginning of me making videos before I had all the extra experience that I do now. So how does this feel? How does it handle the road? Being only a couple years old, an old school formula with leaf springs in the back, well, the length doesn't actually feel that noticeable. This does feel a lot more manageable than a full-size truck, even though it's not much less long, although it is a little bit lower to the ground. The seats, for being cloth, they are about as comfortable as I remember. They're not bad, but they're not fantastic. There's not a ton of lumbar support, but it gives me just enough to probably be content for a long drive. I don't think I've ever driven my own Tacoma longer than maybe 3 hours, so I'm not the best person to speak to on how this does on a road trip, but I do like the 6 o'clock handle. The speaker system, it's not fantastic. It's good enough for what you're getting. The wind and road noise with these Wrangler tires, they don't really kick up a lot of rocks, at least on the roads that I've been on, and not a lot of wind protrudes into the cabin experience. Again, let's listen to that engine. Yeah, it has enough power, but you really do have to rev it out, and this is handling bumps in the road pretty well. With about 9.4 inches of ground clearance, you can drive over some pretty good stuff, but with the 6-foot bed, you're not going to have a crazy good breakover angle. Honestly, it's probably not going to be better than a Subaru for that aspect of its off-road prowessness, but I like it a lot. I miss it a lot, and the more I drive it, the more familiar it feels. A lot of the materials on the inside, they're not super high-end, but they do feel durable. They feel like they're gonna last as long as a Twinkie or a cockroach, basically to the end of time. And this one is definitely the old man spec with the dash cover. I have not ever seen one of those. I didn't even know that they would make something like that on a 3rd gen Tacoma. But overall, it's really nostalgic for me to be back in the one. It really makes me want potentially the new one. We'll see what happens down the road. Anyways, guys, let's get to the 0 to 60, and then we'll wrap this up with my final thoughts. 0 to 60 in the 3rd gen Tacoma. Sport mode is on, traction control is off. We're gonna see what it can do. And a little bit of a brake rev. Doesn't break the tires loose. Oh, there it goes, just a little chirp. cruise 0 to 60 came in at 9.25 seconds, or a little bit faster at that rollout. But keep in mind, density altitude 6,300 feet, so this vehicle is down on power 20% compared to a cold day at sea level. My final thoughts of the third generation Toyota Tacoma. Keep in mind, this one again is a V6 TRD off-road. It does have 15,000 miles, so it's not brand new. And it's about 3 years old as of filming this today because it's a 2021 model year with a 6-foot bed. But overall, it's really nostalgic. I don't know if I would buy one of these over the current 4th generation because personally I am kind of considering going back to a Tacoma when I upgrade my Outback Wilderness in about another year and a half. I enjoy Tacomas. They're good vehicles. For about 19 feet long, or about a foot longer than the short bed or what the access cab with the 6-foot bed is, it actually doesn't feel like as much of a behemoth in length as I was expecting. After driving a couple hundred cars on my channel over the last 2 years, this does not drive the best. It's heavy. The new one is 200 pounds heavier even, but thankfully it's much quicker. But this one, it just feels like a Toyota. It feels like the 5th gen 4Runner. You don't have the greatest visibility, especially forward facing. The new one thankfully does have better safety features, but it's just a gosh darn good truck and it's gonna last you a long time. You're probably never gonna have to worry about, is it gonna start up? Is it gonna fire up? Is it gonna get you where you wanna go? Sure, the approach and departure and breakover angles are not very good for an off-roader, but really trucks aren't the best for off-roading in general unless it's purpose-built. So driving this on the street, driving this where you're normally gonna drive it, I think if you use the bed at least once every couple weeks, you could probably justify having a mid-size truck. Personally, it's your money, so spend it however you want. But for $38,000, basically a brand new example of what was probably about a $45,000 truck, I think if you get this, I think it's a safe bet. I think it's gonna hold its value pretty well. I would recommend maybe getting a better tire, especially for the winter, than what these Wranglers do. I've driven and reviewed some Wrangler tires in the winter before. They haven't been my favorite. Also, these projector headlights, they look good. They look like they should be bright. They're kind of like a halogen headlight. They're really not very bright. I'm sure some aftermarket LED bulbs will fix that problem right away. Same with the fog lights. They're just not that good compared to modern standards. But overall, this is a phenomenal truck. I think it's gonna go down in history as one of the best trucks ever made. What are your thoughts though? Like this video if you got anything out of it. Comment those thoughts below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want this clean example of a 2021 TRD off-road, I'll link the dealership in the description below. Until next time guys, take care.